Alright, so welcome back to the Blender tutorial on character modeling. So this is the third part, whereby it's actually to put the animation into Unity and setting up the controller as well as the animation clips within Unity, so that kind of like when you do something and a specific animation will be played. So understanding animation controller itself, animator controller itself. So the animator is a controller whereby it controls like which animation clips to play depending on the condition. So basically, if you have a couple of animation clips like idle, walk, run, jump, death, right? So there are many different clips whereby the animator will play different clips depending on the condition. So in this part of the tutorial, we actually look into how we can change the state of the controller so that the animator itself can play the different clips depending on the situation lah. So the very first thing, there's three steps here. Okay, first thing is to drag the both FBX whereby you have created from the Misamo, the walk and the idle, onto Unity. Right. Then after that, you want to bring the model onto the scene. And lastly, before I move on, is to understand of the FBX that you brought into Unity, right? Which one is the animation clip itself? Right, because there's quite a few things there's inside the FBX file itself. Okay, so without further ado, let's dive over to Unity. Right, so basically this is an empty project. So the very first thing we want to do is to bring the FBX onto the asset folder. Alright, so with that done, right, the next step is to bring the idle animation or the one of the models onto the scene. Okay, so with that done, right, okay, the next thing, right, is to identify what exactly is an animation clip. Okay, so if you click the expand button, which is this little arrow, okay, you can see that you have got something like a play button here. So this will be the animation clip itself actually. Okay, so if you have got idle and if you have got walking, okay, the animation clips are different. Okay, so subsequently, right, we are actually gonna use the controller to decide which animation clip to play. So moving back, okay, so the next thing, right, we want to do is actually to create the controller itself. Okay, so you can right click on the asset panel, create, and then the animator controller. Okay, so this is just to create an empty controller whereby you can put the different states inside. So under the project tabs, right, and the assets, you want to right click, create, and you want to choose the animator controller. Okay, so maybe you can call this character controller. Okay, so with that done, right, okay, when you double click, basically you got an empty controller. Okay, so after you have got a controller, right, you got to bring it onto your component of your character lah. Okay, so let's go back and do that step very quickly. So basically, I want to click on my idle, right, and for not to confuse ourselves, right, I'm gonna just rename this, say to character. Okay, so this is our character, and we are gonna play different animation clip on it. So character, then we choose inspector, and we got an animator. So if you do not have an animator here, you can always right click animator. Okay, so then that's how you add an animator component. Okay, so with that done, right, I'm gonna bring my project tabs here. I'm gonna bring my animator that I've created over to the animator component. Okay, so take note, controller has a slightly different icon as compared to an animation clip if you notice. Okay, right, so let's go back to our slides. So this step is done. Right, so next we're gonna bring in both animation clips into the controller itself, and we're gonna rename them accordingly. So idle and walk. So with that said, right, so basically we have an empty controller. I'm gonna bring in my, so this is my idle. So I'm gonna rename, because if not, both will be called misamo underscore com. So I'm gonna call this idle. Okay, and as well I'm gonna bring in my walk. Okay, so that's all we got to do for here. Right. Right, so what we have done is we go into the controller, bring in both animation clips, rename them, and we got two different animation clips. Okay. So moving on, will be the transition, right? So we're gonna say idle can go into walk, and when you're in the walking state, you can also go back to the idle state. Okay. So that's basically creating these two arrows here. And after that, right, then the next question is when will I know I'm going into walking state or going into idle state? Okay. So for this case, right, we're gonna use a parameter, which is this I plus icon here, and we're gonna create a boolean variable. Okay, so depend on you. In your game, you can use velocity or your moving speed as a parameter. So if you're moving, then of course it's gonna be walk. And if your velocity is 0, of course it's gonna go back to idle. Likewise, if let's say your velocity is more than a certain speed, you can consider that as a run. So for that case, you're gonna use like kind of like a float to represent speed. Okay. So lastly, right, is to set the condition as we have discussed. So if walking is true, then we'll go from idle to walk. And if walking is false, then we'll just go back. Okay, so we are gonna set up the controller now. So the very first step is to create the transition state. Right, so basically just right click and make transition. Right, so up and down. Right, after which we're gonna add the parameter. Okay, so for parameter for this example, you're gonna use float boolean is walking. Right, so the next thing is we're gonna say from idle to walk. Okay, we're gonna set the condition to add a condition. So if it's walking is true, we're gonna move from idle to the walk. Okay, we haven't renamed the walk. Okay, we're gonna move from idle to walk. Likewise, if we are from walk, we want to go back to idle, our condition will have to be false. Okay, so that's all for transiting between the two different animation clip. Right, so kind of this is done. So next thing we'll come to write some coding. Okay, so we'll create a character script, and we'll try to change the parameter using the code. Okay, so the code itself is pretty straightforward. We start off with a parameter with a variable animator. Okay, and then we get reference to the animator. Then likewise we're gonna listen for input key presses. For this case we're gonna use spacebar. Right, in your game maybe you want to use W or whatever to move and stuff. So when we press on spacebar for this case, we're gonna set the is walking variable to true. Likewise, if we are not pressing on spacebar, we're gonna set is walking to false. So take note that is walking, right, belongs to animator and it's a bool. Okay, that's the few things that we have to take note. So without further ado, we're gonna go and dive into creating a character script. So character, add a component, let's say character character script. So that will take a while to load. And let's open the script. Right. So at the very top, we're gonna create a public. Okay. Create an animator variable. Then you're gonna say, okay, you're gonna get the component animator. Right. So this is basically getting the animator from the inspector and store it inside the animator. Right. So with that done, next thing is to do the input. So I'm gonna say if so we're gonna say if you are pressing key code space, right? Then we're gonna set the missing out a bracket here. Alright, you're gonna set the animator. Set boolean. The variable name is walking. So take note that this variable name, right, is case sensitive. So make sure if you have a small I, in your animator is a small eye here. Okay. Right. So if we are not pressing the space bar, otherwise, else, right, and we will be set to false. Okay. Save. Right. So what we are doing in the code, right, is basically changing the parameters here of the animator. Okay. So when we press spacebar, this will become true, and if not, it will become false. And there goes the transition itself. We're gonna set the camera up higher a bit, and maybe let's rotate the character around. Okay. Uh, okay lah, something like that. Okay, save. So with that done, what else do we have? Okay, let's check if we had a reference there. I mean, ideally we have find the reference in start, but let's just drag our reference in. Okay, save it. Okay, let's test if pressing spacebar works. So by default, currently it's currently in the idle state. So it's in the idle animation, and you can see from here. Okay, see that note that it's not repeating, so we'll fix that. So now if I press on spacebar, right, it's got to walk, but it's not looping as well. When I release, it go back onto idle, but idle also not looping as well. Okay, so kind of like our key presses works and stuff, but there's still some stuff we need to fix. Right. So basically, why does it take a while before it change? Because of this exit time thing. Okay, because exit time will wait for it to finish the animation before it transit. So you're gonna remove that lah. But before even we remove that, we want to set the okay, we want to set the animation to loop. So we're gonna click on the idle model. Okay, so idle. Then we're gonna click on the animation. Do we have loop? So let's click on loop time and apply. Same goes for walking. Loop time and apply. Okay, so now if I hold down my spacebar, it should constantly walk. Okay, just ignore this. Right, but you see it took a while before it start walking. So again, right, it took a while. Then it start walking. Right, so we want it to walk instantaneously. And how we can do that, right, is going into animator. Okay, before we fix that, right, let's observe what is happening in the animator. Right, so basically, right, when I play, we can see that by default it's in the idle state. So it's a very long animation. Okay, but when I start to press spacebar, then it will wait for the idle animation to finish before it goes onto the walking animation. And when I release the spacebar, it also makes sure I finish the walk before I go back to idle. Right. So if let's say you want it to like instantaneously go back, change state, what you can do is basically just uncheck the has exit time. Let's do it for both, then we can see the difference. Right, so without exit time, right, instantaneously. Right, else no way we can do this with exit time. Okay. Right, so let's stop this. Okay, always make sure you save. Okay, so we have fixed the exit time as well as the loop. And a few things to take note, right? For I mean the controller itself, that's pretty much it. But of course, you know, a few steps that we need to add and or edit, right? Such as the exit time as well as making the animation to loop. Right, so these are some of the stuff that you need to tweak depending on the animation. Certain animation you don't need to loop, and certain animation you want it to play finish before you change the animation clip. Right, for a start, in your assignment, let's keep it simple. Probably all you need is probably walk and run. Sorry, idle and run. If you need more, then maybe die. Right. If you want even more, then maybe attack. Okay. So kind of need to pace yourself. Don't kill yourself with too complex animations. Generally, I think if you're gonna do combo attacks and stuff, normally those are the really quite troublesome and messy part. So maybe just avoid that for now. Keep it simple. So this animation can apply to both like your characters as well as your enemy, or as well as maybe even NPC and stuff. So it depending on what you are doing, it's quite useful and quite likely that you will need to apply this into your game lah. So with more animation, the transition get more and more complicated. As mentioned earlier, if you're gonna do a combo attack and stuff, things really get complicated really quickly. So just take note of that when you're working with animator controller. Uh, with that said, that's all I have for the character modeling. So I hope this kind of give you a good idea from like how to model a character to applying some auto rig and animations, and lastly putting them into Unity. Right. So hopefully in your projects and assignments, I can see that you have got characters and stuff. Right. I mean, you can model your own characters. If not, I think you can also use characters that is on Asset Store or as well as other platform. I mean, so long they are 3D, pop it into Misamo and then choose an animation, download it back, and kind of integrate into your game. So that's kind of like what you can do as a programmer, without ability to do modeling or animations. Oh, so I think it's generally important so that you kind of have a idea of how things work from start to end, right? So yep, I mean that's all I have. So good luck and have fun.